Hello and welcome to another episode of But Why, the podcast that's all about digging into big questions and tricky topics via honest conversations. This week we're going to be looking at domestic abuse with the charity Refuge, and I'm going to be talking to two guests. First up, Natasha Saunders, who is an active campaigner and independent consultant for causes against domestic abuse after suffering 8 years of sexual, mental, physical, economic, emotional abuse, as well as coercive control. She is committed to raising awareness of the far-reaching effects of domestic abuse, both on a personal level and on a wider societal level. After that, I'll be talking to Kim Manning-Cooper. Who is Refuge's head of media and campaigns. She has worked in human rights and social justice for more than 20 years. She is the priority campaigns and communications for large INGOs, including Oxfam and Amnesty International, and worked around the world as an aid worker and advocate. Whew. So before I get going, I always like to just ask a few fun questions to get us in the zone, although we have just off mic gone straight into massive chat.
Yeah.
How are you really? What star sign are you? And what's your favourite crisp?
Ooh. At the moment, the Walker's paprika ones.
Fairly classic.
Had some of those on the train yesterday. I hate eating crisps on the train because you're like, don't chew too loud.
Yeah, it's noisy.
Kind of weird. Star sign, I'm Sagittarius. So
that makes sense.
That's all I need to say, really. Yeah. Maybe that's why I like paprika crisps. Yeah. And how am I really? Oh God, what a question. Slightly insane, slightly highly strung.
Mm-hmm.
I empathise with everything, everywhere. And I prefer my animals over almost any human. And I have a lot of animals.
Do you? Tell me quickly about. I get really jealous of this because although I'm a Londoner,
Cocker Spaniel.
Yeah.
I've got 6 cats, 4 ragdolls, 1 half ragdoll because one of my ragdolls, Luna Purgood, had a one-night stand. Oh. My other ragdolls are Ragnar, which is her son with Dobby, and Draco Meowfoy, best cat name ever, in case anybody wants a tip. And then I've got 3 Icelandic horses who regularly stroll in my house, which you can see on my Instagram. Love to put a picture of the horse in the house. We live in a big old converted.
What size are they then?
They're between about 13.3 and 14.2. So there's 3 of them. They're staggered between there. And yeah, they like to, Icelandic horses, because of the weight bear and their bone density, are classed as horses, even though they're pony size. But yeah, they come in the house and have a stroll around and graze the back garden, and we have to lock the conservatory because they've worked out how to let themselves in and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a madhouse.
Yeah, it really is. You have got a lot. You've got a lot of animals going on in there, but also amazing. So when you're saying you empathise with everything and you're highly strung, I can only imagine that is probably, unfortunately or fortunately, because empathy is useful, linked to your experience of abuse. Can you tell me a bit about that, in particular, how even in my intro, reading out all the different shapes that took?
So basically, when I was 17, I met a guy who decided to wage war on my body and mind. Before I knew it, I'd changed my number, I'd given up my job, I'd moved 30 miles away from my parents, cancelled my intensive driving course, and I was isolated. I was in this house. If I wanted to go out with my friends, bearing in mind I'm 17 and he's 14 years older than me, it was, why don't you want to sit with me? Why don't you want to stay with me? And because I'd had quite an erratic childhood, moving around and stuff, the fact that he had, a stable home he'd lived in for a number of years, a car on finance, a daughter from a previous marriage that he saw every week, it sort of felt like that was the stability that you're supposed to aim for. We're sold this social dream of you should settle down and be happy, and there's your picket fence and your Labrador, and no offense to anybody that's got a Labrador, obviously, but it's very much it's what you're supposed to aspire to as a female. And so I went along with it, and I knew for a long time that it wasn't normal. He was taking photos of me. He was threatening to share them with my parents. He was taking naked photos of me and sharing them with women online, trying to get them to have threesomes with us. He had me phone a prostitute at one point. And then I fell pregnant on the pill.
Wow.
And I remember vividly being 8 weeks pregnant in the bath, hands on my stomach, going, we could do this on our own. And yet it still took me until she was almost 6 to be able to leave. During my pregnancy, he was a long distance courier. He starved me, wouldn't let me drink water. I remember that I was lactose intolerant, and when we used to drive to, say, Glasgow, he would buy himself a cheeseburger and a milkshake from McDonald's, knowing I couldn't eat anything, and things like that. Amazingly, my daughter was born healthy, but the day that I went in, I got up and hemorrhaged everywhere. And I phoned him, and he was like, well, no, because you need to sort yourself out, clean up before we're going anywhere. And you need to wait till I get back. You're not going in an ambulance. So we got to the hospital. I got put on a drip. They forgot to give me an epidural. So I was on a drip induction, no epidural, no pain relief. You know, I'm just turned 20. And I'm like, I didn't even ever want children. What the hell is going on? As she was about to be born, her heartbeat dipped. So obviously the room filled with people. They lost her heartbeat. So I was given a cut. She was Von Hoos delivery, came out with a little Hoover circle on her head, you know. And the second she was out, she cried. And they put her in my arms. And I remember all those sort of like, oh my God, what am I going to do with the baby? I looked at her and was like, holy shit, I made this. And I remember looking down at her, and she's crying, as they do. And his first words were, don't just look at it, shut it up. Or don't just stare at it, shut it up. And then he walked out the room. And there was a massive fail by medical professionals because nobody knew where to look. And then the older midwife sort of rubbed my arm and went, I think he had tears in his eyes, pop it. And I'm like, no, he fucking didn't. Don't lie. I'm like, no, he didn't. So, you know, so I went home the following day, and he immediately had all the neighbours over. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. You know, look, it's a baby. But behind the scenes, he didn't hold her, feed her, change her, do anything for her. Fast forward a couple of years, and we were doing Hermes courier work. He frequently quit jobs so he could, in his words, keep an eye on me. And he would strap our daughter into her car seat for like 5-6 hours a day. And we would argue about it, and we would, you know, and because I had to sit in the car with him, you know, I had to go everywhere with him. And then I fell pregnant with my son. Now, I don't think I've ever been in such a dark place in my whole life. And I remember standing at the top of the stairs thinking, I could throw myself top to bottom. And then I realised that if I did, there was nobody to look after my daughter. So when I went into hospital to have Thomas, I had to have him alone because he wouldn't let anyone look after his daughter. And when he asked his mum, she said no. So he brought her along whilst I'm in labour to the hospital after accusing me of doing it on purpose during rush hour. My contractions were 50 seconds apart and the hospital was 40 minutes away. So I was kind of like, we need to get a move on, you know. Bearing in mind that day I'd done shopping, I'd done a horse, I'd done a sponsored walk with my daughter and all the parcels. I was like, oh my God, now I get to have a baby. Awesome. Had my son, absolutely no trouble whatsoever. It was fantastic. And then I texted him and said, here's your son. And he said, great, you're coming home. I was like, it's 10 o'clock at night. He was like, you're coming home. He'll do the parcels tomorrow. And so he came and he got me and we went home. And the 3-year-old at the time, Darcy, was hysterical, obviously. New baby. She's been made to get up in the middle of the night. You know, it's all unsettled. She's never had a night away from me. And we put her to bed and he screamed at her that we loved the new baby more than her already. So I managed to settle her, settle the baby, got into bed, and then he decided it was a good time to rape me and rip my stitches.
You've just come out the day you've
just
had
come
a
out
baby.
of hospital. Yeah, I've had a cut. I had a baby 4 hours beforehand, maybe 5 hours beforehand, and he decided that he would have sex with me. And I remember being in the bathroom, because we had a bathroom and a separate toilet sort of thing. And I remember being in that tiny room, clutching the wall, thinking, oh my God, what do I do? It was like somebody was pouring blood out of me. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do? I couldn't tell anyone. I've had people online turn around and go, well, it doesn't sound very believable to me. And I'm like, I'm not talking about abdominal stitches. I couldn't tell anyone. How on earth would I be like to a midwife? Yeah, sorry, I tripped and ripped all my stitches. And I just ignored it. I couldn't sit down for like 3 weeks. In the end, somebody we knew literally dropped off a rubber ring. She was like, it's not normal. You can't sit down yet, don't you? Yeah. And, it was just one of those things. And then the next morning, he expected me up at 6 o'clock to feed the baby, do the parcels and the manifests on the computer whilst he stayed in bed. And that pretty much defines what our relationship was like.
Yeah.
So, and that continued all the way until 2015, when one day enough was enough.
And I mean, of course, because earlier on when you were saying, I was like, when did you begin to realise that it was abusive? But I mean, by this point,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. But you rationalise it. What happens is you go into that fight or flight mode, and to survive, you normalise it. And when you normalise it, you almost have to accept it. And so then when you're told, it's all you, nobody wants a single mother, you're crazy, by the end, I was writing in my phone, when he'd go and get me a drink, I would write what it was as I walked out the room, because I knew when I come back, I'd be like, here's your coffee, and he'd be like, I asked for a Coke. And I'd be like, and I'd go and get a Coke, and he'd be like, I asked for a water. You're mental. And it just, it was absolutely horrendous. I knew it was abusive, but I also wouldn't voice it to myself. The day I went to the police, so I phoned Refuge's National Domestic Abuse Helpline, and the woman I spoke to saved my life. She told me that it did matter, that I was walking the earth, and that I could be a good mum on my own, and that I could, And so I went to the police station the next day with the only intention of getting a non-molestation order, and the officer just said to me, I'd run for my life across Horsham Park by that point, and he just said, is there anything else you want to tell me? And it all just came out. It's, yeah.
By which point, how old? I'm trying to get the time frame. How old are your kids at this point?
So the day I left, my daughter was 5 and my son was 2. My daughter was just a couple of months shy of 6, and my son was 2.5. But yeah.
And then what happened next from the point that you did tell the police?
So he stood up and said, I've got to get a sexual offences officer. Then the tensest hour of my life, which was when my ex managed to get my kids from school and disappeared with them, and the police couldn't find him. They eventually found him walking down the road with the kids and managed to take him and drop them off somewhere. And he was arrested. I got taken to the hospital and felt like I was on a mortuary slab with lights and latex gloves and photos being taken of me. And I remember the humanity of that moment, because I remember that somebody gave me like a tray of biscuits and were like, there we go. And I sat there and was just like, and my phone had died, and I was sat there literally staring at my phone, and the lady said to me, a lady came in and she said, what phone have you got? And I said, and on her lunch hour, she went and got me a charging cable from her house. And I will never forget the humanity of that letting me still have a connection. And when we were going home that night, we're in the car, so I'm with my mum and her partner, and I'm literally just like, and the kids obviously think this is some grand, great adventure. And my daughter says, car and get our things out. I said, sweetheart, the car was repossessed 6 months ago. We don't have it anymore. She went, no, the car Daddy parked across the road. And it had turned out that he had stolen a courtesy car from work, not parked it on our driveway, but parked it in between other cars up a side road from our house. And in the car was my son's changing bag, passports, laptop, camera, anything of value, anything he thought of value, even handbags of mine that he thought were valuable. And to this day, I'm convinced that he was going to follow through on, some people have gone, well, he had their passports. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just the sort of thing he would do. He promised me if I ever left him again, because I left in 2014 and went back, if I ever left him again, he would drive the kids into a central reservation of a motorway, into a lake, off of a cliff in Brighton or whatever, and he would make me live with the consequences of knowing that my kids were dead because of my own actions. And that's what he had over me. And then from there, the police investigation took 3 years. So in that time, I went into a woman's refuge, and I was told it would take me 9.5 months to get housed. And I was like, no. So I went down to the local housing office and I was like, right, I have been through horrific trauma. How dare you expect me to stay in limbo? How are we supposed to heal as a family in a house where last night the police were storming it because one of the girls had a knife because I was in the critical house because there was nowhere else for us? And in the end, we were put on the active housing list and we actually all got housed. I helped the girls in there and we all got housed within about a month, whether it was temporary housing or permanent. I moved into my flat on the 5th of March, I think it was. 5th or 6th of March, 2015. Couldn't afford to put carpets down. I went to Argos and bought the cheapest clearance things that they had. And I remember the first night my kids went to sleep, sitting there going, this is what freedom feels like.
Yeah, we're safe.
Then I met my partner online, and we were together about 5 weeks, and I had a minor stroke and I lost the use of my right side. Still got a morphine patch on now. And I remember he had to go home because he lived in Weston-super-Mare and I was in Portsmouth. And I remember he had to go home because he worked and thinking, and he was like, I've just got to nip outside a minute. And I thought, this guy's not coming back. Like, and who can blame him? You know, like, not only have I got 2 damaged kids, a house with nothing in, you know, a rape case hanging over me, and an ex who's stalking me online and breaching his bail constantly, and the police aren't acting on it. Now I've had a stroke. Oh my God. And I remember he came back in, they'd put food in front of me. And at that point, I was 4 stone lighter. I was a size 4 where clothes fell down on me. And they'd put a cannula in my left hand, and I'm left-handed, which meant I couldn't move my hand because the cannula was all pushing up through my skin. And my right hand was useless because I couldn't feel it. And they'd just plonked a plate of food in front of me. And I remember he came back in and he drew the curtain and he fed me. He sat down and he fed me. And he was like, I've taken 2 weeks leave and I'll take however much more if we need to. And we'd been together only 3 months when we moved up to Nottingham, and everybody was like, whoa, this is insane, you're doing this again. And I was like, right, he's just left somebody who was narcissistic and abusive to him. You know, she used to say horrific things to him and think because she was a woman that was okay, which it's not. And then in turn, I had my ex stalking me, harassing me, trying to find out where I was living, reporting me for child abuse, you know. And we moved to Nottingham and we never looked back. And in the time it took us to go to court for the rape charges against my ex, we had a stalker in Scotland when I was 5 months pregnant with our child together, threatening to pour boiling water over me and kick my baby out of me. That was all because my ex was giving her information on me, private letters, videos, pictures, threatening to put them online. He never got held accountable for that. She did. She got dragged to court. And in my opinion, she was a vulnerable person who was taken advantage of as well. And that just shows the strength of his manipulation, because he manipulated her from 450 miles away. So the reality of that is a lot of people go, you must hate her. And I'm like, not at all. I feel awful for her because she's got a criminal record now. You know, at the time, don't get me wrong, I had absolutely no sympathy for her. But being an adult and looking back on it, you know, we got married, which is a huge positive. We've been married 5 years this year. We had a child together. We got dragged in and out of family court by my ex. Every time we were there, he'd shout that he had evidence I was being investigated by the police. He had evidence that I'd lied. The prosecuting barrister had turned against me. Honestly, lie after lie after lie. And obviously he never got held in contempt of court, you know, or lying. And he still harassed me online constantly. So I gave evidence on International Women's Day 4 years ago, and I was cross-examined for 5.5 hours.
Wow.
When it got to the end of the cross-examination, obviously normally prosecution then do a redress to sort of tie up any sort of holes that have appeared. And the prosecution went, no, we're good. I got accused of being naked in bed was consent. I was like, oh, okay. So can we just go over how I wasn't allowed to wear clothes, like bed clothes, like pajamas? I wasn't allowed to do that. So where does that leave us? And he sort of went, and then he was like, when you phoned the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, you never said anything about rape. And I went, okay. And if you listen to my testimony, I've told you that until I walked into that police station, I never had any intention of reporting rape after I knew how poor the statistics were. And he sort of went, And then at one point he said to me, and if you look at X, Y, and Z, do those messages sound abusive to you? I went, yes. He went, do they sound controlling? I went, yes. He went, do they sound abusive, once more for the court sort of thing? And I went, yeah, they do, yes. And he went, then why did you send them? And I went, excuse me, if you look, you'll see that the defendant sent those messages to me. And he was like, oh, yes, well, okay. And I was like, oh, somebody looks like a bit of a twat. So yeah, it was colourful, to say the least. But the end result was he was found guilty. He was found guilty of 3 out of 4 charges. The 4th charge that he wasn't found guilty for was he was found guilty for the night my son was born until the day I left, that entire period, and 2 individual counts of rape in the weeks before I left. The 4th count was from before my son was born, but because I couldn't give a definitive start date to when I identified the rape's beginning, and I wasn't willing to lie about it, that count couldn't be found guilty, which I understand, you know. So he was found guilty of 3 counts of rape and 1 of sexual assault by penetration. I believe that the prosecutors put the sexual assault by penetration in there because of the disparity between conviction rates for rape and sexual assault being over 60% between the 2 of them. They put the sexual assault in there in case he was found not guilty on the rape charges.
Oh, okay.
I think at the time, don't quote me, but I think at the time rape convictions were about 17% and sexual assault was 78%.
Right.
So it's a big disparity. And I think it was during the proceeds of family court, I found out that he was a child sex offender from before I met him, and that he'd only been given 200 hours community service for indecent assault on a child under the age of 13. I still don't know how old that little girl was, but my daughter is 13 next week and she is still definitively a child, and he would have been 26 at the time. He wasn't put on the sex offenders register because it was a month before the sex offenders register came into force, and nobody around him ever told me. He never told me. In the course of giving evidence, there was a woman who came forward who I think had lived with him for a number of years, didn't know he had a wife and child, and when she found out, he followed her in his car, punched her window through and attempted to strangle her in a car seat. Because of the trial, obviously you're not, if you don't know who a witness is, you're not allowed to know their name. But I always felt like this huge gratitude to her, because the people that testified for me that knew me did it because they knew me. But to have someone knock on your door and go, hey, you know, that really traumatic event 15 years ago, I know you're married with 2 kids now and you've rebuilt your life, but can you come and relive it for the court? And she did. And he was found guilty of 12 years in prison. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison, 3 on licence, and lifetime on the sex offenders register. My husband then applied to adopt the kids. In the meantime, through my media work, I got a message one day from a lady who was best friends with the lady who gave evidence for me. And she said, I've seen your piece in a magazine and I wanted to say thanks. And my friend was with him and it was awful for her. And I went, I need you to get a message to her. And I thanked her. I thanked her for doing something that a lot of people would find easier not to do. And I'm really proud to say that we're friends now. And she supports me in everything. And that means a hell of a lot to me. In the course of the adoption, my ex pulled every trick out of the book, looked up every legal thing he could, tried to stall it, tried to make accusations. And in July last year, the adoption was finally granted. So my ex-husband had his rights completely removed, and my husband is now legally their dad. They've got new birth certificates. My 2 children, my 2 children from my first marriage are over the moon. You know, Darcy's almost 13. I couldn't be more proud of the young woman she's turned into. You know, during the Sarah Everard case, she stood up in school and she spoke about it. And, you know, and my son Thomas, he's had some trouble. He's a very sensitive little kid, but he's a really good kid. He's got a lot of empathy for the world. That holds him back sometimes because he gets so upset over things. And my son Henry is feral. He's basically feral. Like, yeah. He's like that little kid from the Wild Thornberrys, that Donny kid that they found in the bushes, you know. And last year we moved from Nottingham down here. And during lockdown, I decided to really go at it with domestic abuse. And along with Refuge, we managed to change the law with the Naked Threat campaign. And we were told it would take 4 years. And I was like, you changed COVID laws overnight, so don't think so. 9 months with the help of the amazing MP for Rushcliffe, Ruth Edwards, who really didn't get a lot of thanks in the whole course of the campaign. She was amazing. On the day of royal assent, she thanked me in Parliament, and so did Vicky Atkins from the Home Office, which was really overwhelming to be thanked by name and really acknowledged for it. And yeah, it's my work with Refuge is so important to me because not only do I owe them my life, also I'm that voice for every woman who feels like she doesn't have one. And I'm that voice for every woman who I get messages from women going, I'm not brave enough to do what you do. And I'm like, it's not about bravery. It's not about bravery. It's about your support network and where you are in your recovery journey. And, you know, I lecture every new recruit that goes through the Metropolitan Police Force. Every 5 weeks, I go down to London and I lecture them. I tell them about lived experience, but I also tell them about how to cope with the feelings that they have as an officer when a woman won't leave. You know, the most common question is, why don't you just leave? And I'm like, okay, think about what you took to work today. I want you to put it in your pocket, but leave your bank card because I'm going to drain the account dry. And I'm also going to report your phone lost or stolen, and probably the car stolen too. You can't go home. You can't go to anywhere he knows because you're putting them in danger. You don't know where your kids are sleeping tonight. And if you've got any pets, remember he's going to kick them around the kitchen like he always does when you do something wrong. This time he might just kill one. The amount of kicks in the ribs I took getting between his German Shepherd and his foot. It's one of those things where it's not so easy. And people go, I'm really sorry, you shouldn't ask, why don't you just leave? But I wish people would, especially to me, because I'm like, I can tell you why. And I can make you think why. You know, you don't have to have suffered domestic abuse to be an ally. You just have to have the empathy to understand the horror of it. I woke up this morning and I'd had somebody comment on my Facebook post that he would give me a real D and it won't be rape because I'll enjoy it this time. Honestly, and I had a message. I've put it on my Instagram story, and I was literally like, I'm sure your mother would be so proud of you if you weren't hiding behind a fake account, but thank you. It's just this sort of attitude throughout society where, you know, because rape has been made a joke at times. I say this to the Met, you know, if you joke about it, it takes away the seriousness of it. If you're making a racist joke, it takes away the hurt of racism. If you make a homophobic comment, it takes away, you know, it makes it normal, and you don't associate it with the hurt and toxicity that it actually is. So, yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, I can talk a lot.
No, it's amazing. I think Clemmie, you're doing great interviewing, but you can listen to you all day. First of all, wow. I mean, I'm in awe of you and everything that you've done, and also how you've literally made your life. Everything has fallen into place from you because of your courage in the face of really the most awful things, and you survived. I mean, you survived.
So I've got so I had my logo is a phoenix, and somebody, I think I've got one here, somebody made drew the phoenix for me. It's even on my phone case, and it says survive, rise, thrive, because you survive what you're going through, you rise above it, and then you're going to thrive.
Yeah.
And it's like my Instagram is filled with pictures of my family life and my pets and me happy, and you know why? It's not to rub it in the face of anyone.
No.
And I mean, it's really important to say, if you leave an abusive relationship, you don't have to get with another person. That doesn't fulfill you. So my husband is not my husband because I need a man. My husband could walk out on me tomorrow and it will break my heart because he's my best friend. But my God, I'd get over it. I'd pick myself up, I'd dust myself off, and I'd be just fine. We're together because we are each other's biggest fan and we support each other. When we've had a shit day, one of us goes out of the way to cheer the other one up. And you know what? There is no one more in the world that I want a hug from when I've done well. He's the first person I tell. And yet he's also the first person to go on, go down there, get on the train, go and do that, go show your face, go push yourself, go, you know, we're together because not because we need each other, but because we support each other and we complement each other's characters. But if you leave and you want to be single, that's fine. But just remember, not every person in the world is a perpetrator. And I think it's sort of when we had the Sarah Everard case and we had the police and everybody was going, we can't trust the police. I was sort of like, okay, I get what you're saying, but when Harold Shipman killed a bunch of patients, he was also in a position of trust, and nobody thought twice about going to their GP because we know not all GPs are killers. And that's what I try and get across to the people I talk to. But I show my life now because there was a time where, 8 years ago, I can tell you now, Clemmie, I would have woken up and watched the clock for bedtime. I would have trodden on eggshells. I would have done whatever it took to protect my kids from him because they weren't allowed in the lounge. They had to watch TV on the hard chairs in the kitchen or sit on the lino. Their toys were in the kitchen. They were not allowed to live like children. There was no lounge. There was, it was Christmas. Otherwise, it was his space. And I would have done whatever it took to shield them from him and then gone to bed and just prayed that he wasn't going to rape me that night. I can't explain the change. The change can be amazing just because you can't see what that change will be. Just live your life. When people go to me, I'm so sorry for what you've been through. Why? Why are you sorry? I'm not a rapist. I'm fine. Like, what happened to me is not a definition of who I am. If somebody steals your bag, that doesn't mean you're a thief, does it? It's the other it's on the other person. Good people do not go around destroying other people. And so victims need to be taught that they're going to be okay. It might not feel like it right now. And yes, you do have to go through a lot of difficult feelings, but there is support out there. And if you're listening to this and you are in an abusive situation and you don't know what to do, phone that helpline. Go on their website. There is a live chat. They have interpreters. I know it's far more difficult for women from different ethnicities to access services, especially if they don't have, legal right to reside in the UK. But the reality is that help is out there. And, my end goal is to shine a light on all the shadows in which perpetrators of our society hide, so everybody sees them for who they are. So we are more aware. If 1 in 4 women in England and Wales will suffer abuse in their lifetime, we all know somebody suffering it. And the worst thing is, as Kim Manning Cooper said in her speech at a gallery I was at the other night, we all know a perpetrator too.
Yeah, that's often a really hard thing to get your head around.
Yeah.
A colleague, a friend, relatives. Yeah, we definitely will.
And that's really hard, isn't it? How do you address that? How do you, but I think it's one of those, my perpetrator, he had abused his ex-wife. He'd abused multiple women, gave evidence in the trial that I didn't know about. There had been women from when he was younger, way before he had kids. I mean, his daughter, I say his daughter, my daughter, as in from his first marriage. She has her mum, wonderful human, and she has me. She's coming up this weekend, actually.
Really?
I think 2 Christmases ago, maybe 3 Christmases ago, she gave my husband a letter, and she'll kill me for saying this, but in the letter, she put, Ben, there's only 10 years between us, and it's taken me like 3 months to write this letter because I keep rewriting it, and there's only 10 years between us, and I'm not like asking to call you dad, but please can I change my surname legally to Saunders, because you are my father figure. You are the dad of my brother and sister, and she classes Henry as her brother as well. And I can't think of any other surname that I'd ever want to have.
Wow.
And so now her surname is Saunders too. So a lot of people find that a bit weird, and I go, oh, it's my extra daughter, and they're like, how old were you when you had her? And I'm like, no, like, she's got 2 mums. And then they're like, what? And I'm like, oh my God, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it
But
doesn't
yeah,
matter.
she comes up with her partner, who's absolutely lovely. She's at Winchester Uni, and yeah, I'm not going to punish her for who her
No,
father is.
no, it's not her, is it?
So and she is part of our family, and she'll always be part of our family. And what a man my husband is. Hey, not only can you take these 2 kids on, can you take the child from his first marriage on as well? Do you mind doing that? And he's just like, no, that's fine. This is Shannon, and that's how it is. So it often gets overlooked. So obviously, a lot of people, I don't take compliments well. People go, "You're amazing," and I go, "I like birthday cake," or something awkward. I'm like, ah, but oh, look, a boss. But people forget just what my husband does behind the scenes.
Yeah.
My husband accepts all of this stuff. He has colleagues who go, I heard your missus on the radio, or I saw her here, or I saw her there. Oh my God, and he's just so supportive of me. And he's so supportive of the things I do and women's rights. And he's my sounding board for when I have a mad idea that I'm going to do something or take something on, and sometimes he does have to slow me down. Sometimes he has to be like, hey, like, chill a little bit. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, it's to do what I do, you have to have, that whole "it takes a village to raise a child" comment. It takes a village to do what I do. And I've, between Refuge and their press team, like Kim, she's an absolutely amazing human. She's from Portsmouth too. She actually went to the same school as me years apart,
No
which was
way.
really weird. So the first time we spoke, she's like, are you from Pompey? I was like, yeah. She was like, what school did you go to? And I said, she went, no way. So we've got like a bonded thing there,
Yeah.
deep. We both survived that school. But yeah, I'm surrounded by love and support and happiness, and it can happen for anybody who suffered abuse. You just have to remember that you're not damaged.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with you.
And it's not, I mean, you want to avoid the cliches of happily ever after, but it does so clearly demonstrate it was never about you. It was never a comment.
Absolutely. And there's that thing of, I think somebody went to me once, oh, you've got a happy ending. I said, it's not a happy ending, it's a happy ever after. And I said, when I changed the law, the head of the Refuge board of directors, absolutely lovely lady, sent me an email, and she said, changing the law is a once in a lifetime achievement and well done. And I remember sort of going to myself, at the time I was 32, and I was like, I'm 32, I'm just getting started.
Yeah, this is the beginning.
I've got people going, are you going to run to be an MP? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And who knows? But the point is that whether you want to get out of that relationship and do what the sort of thing I do, or whether you just want to put it behind you and live your life, do it, because you can be happy and you deserve to be. You deserve to be happy.
So to kind of conclude, a couple of things. If someone is listening who feels either they are in an abusive relationship or a close friend of theirs, what is the next step? It is to get in touch with an organisation like Refuge.
Yeah. So there are so many organisations out there. And, on my website, for example, I have what I believe to be the world's first domestic abuse directory. So basically, I realised that there was nowhere that listed all of these numbers. So I've put, on there things for all genders, for people with disabilities, for people from different ethnicities in the UK, including, Refuge, Women's Aid, all of that sort of thing. On my website, I've got the 0808 2000 247 helpline number, which is run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But I've also got things for people in other countries, because I have people contact me from South America. I had a woman contact me. She said, I went to the police to report rape and they beat and raped me too. What do I, and all I can do for her is be there for her. So we chat on WhatsApp. We chat on WhatsApp, and that's all I can do. But, it occurred to me that I get notifications from all over the world of people hitting my website. And I was like, what if they're looking for help? And Refuge, obviously being abroad, can't help, So I've put all that together. Because if just a couple of people visit those pages and they remember that, then I've done it. I've had women contact me and tell me that I saved their life, and that's a really profound thing.
Unreal.
Hugely, hugely profound thing. so yeah, you know, I think it's one of those things where it's like vibrating. Then it's unusual. That's why somebody ringing me, I'm like, go away.
You don't like phone
Nobody ever
calls.
rings me.
No.
But yeah, it's yeah, reach out to those organisations. On the Refuge website, they've got some really helpful information about what to do if you or somebody you know is being abused. They've got that live chat if, like me, their partner was home all the time or not working, or it's really, really hard to be able to phone somebody. So, you know, maybe doing it via chat is easier. You know, you can arrange a call back at a time that you need. You know, I'd love to be put in a room with the lady who answered my call, because I'd like to show her pictures of my kids, and I'd like to show her a picture of my wedding day, and I'd like to go, do you know what? I wouldn't have any of that without you. I don't get emotional talking about anything, but when I talk about that lady and the idea of meeting her, I'm always like, okay, I'm all right, I'm good. You know, because she probably doesn't even realise.
Can you track her down? Can't you?
I don't know. I've thought about it before, and I've had quite a few people say it, but I don't know if it's like confidential or, you know, but or if she even still works for Refuge. Who knows? It was 7 years ago now, but yeah, you know, it's just a really profound feeling to be able to know that somebody who was just doing their job, you know, it just goes to show we can just be doing our job and we can change someone's life.
Which is also exactly what you're doing, you know.
Yeah, I'm trying my best. I can't teach my kids to change the world if I don't show them how to.
No, I mean, I would want to compliment you again, but you find that awful, so I'm not. But
I'm used to it, but just don't expect me to be like, thank you. I was taught, somebody actually spent like half an hour going, when I compliment you, say thank you. And they were like, you're great. And I was like, thank you. You know, I can do it. I am capable.
Yeah, you are great, and the work that you're doing is great, and I just am always in awe of the human capacity for survival. It's unbelievable,
absolutely.
isn't it? And you know, if we'd have told you in those darkest hours the life you're living now, maybe you wouldn't have believed it, but maybe you would, because that spirit was in you all the way through.
Absolutely, it never leaves you.
No,
it just gets downtrodden and
no.
downtrodden. And one of my favorite sayings that I've coined recently is, you know, I used to be afraid of the fire. Now I am the fire.
Yes.
And nobody can ever put me in darkness again, because I am the light. So come at me. Throw whatever you want at me. Throw, you know, you get all these trolls online. Go for it. Go crazy. I'm ready. I'm good. So it's more about you than it does about me. Go crazy, honey. Make me the center of your world. Thank you very much.
I mean, if I've never heard such Sagittarian energy in all my life. Where can people find you on the internet? What's your site? What's your Instagram?
So my website, I hate saying this because I'm always like bit big-headed, is natashasaunders.co.uk. And my Instagram is handbags n horses. So handbags and horses.
Great combo.
I think you can probably work out why.
Yeah.
And that's my Instagram.
Right.
You'll find me on there.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, because it's not, you know, it's not easy to constantly go through the worst moments of your life, but I know how much
it's necessary.
It is necessary, and
necessary.
You know, as you say, if one person listening to this goes, you know, today's the day I'm going to start to make a change, then
it's the hardest step you will ever take, but it's the first step to the rest of your life.
Yeah, and listen to all the life that's happened to you after that, from that one moment. You know, I'm sure there's been some horrendous moments since, but it shifted everything.
Yeah, and nothing was insurmountable. No. The day I left, I remember sitting on the windowsill in my mum's house that night after everything had gone on, you know, and I hadn't planned to leave, and I'd left, and I didn't know what was going on, and, you know, and I sat there and just went,
here we go.
Yeah. Never going back.
No,
it was the most amazing feeling, and I'll never forget it.
Ugh. I've been trying not to cry for this whole thing, typically.
Oh, bless you! I'm so sorry.
No, I'm like a huge empath as well, and I'm in awe of you, and yeah, and also just the horrendous realization that old reality for you is lots of people's reality today.
That's it. For everybody listening to this who goes, oh my God, just think there are women living like this. I'm the voice for those women.
Mm.
And a lot of women start a conversation with me by going, what I went through wasn't as bad as yours. And I'm like, hey, this is not the trauma Olympics. No. Like, it's not like, hey, gold medalist. It doesn't matter. Even if it's, if it's abuse, if it's depression, if it's any mental health issue, if it's, substance abuse or you lose your job, bereavement, whatever it is, when you are in your darkest time, you feel like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, and you do not have to compare your trauma or your darkness to anybody else's. No. It's not relevant. No. It's not relevant. So when a woman says to me, oh, he never hit me, but I'm like, hey, no, this isn't it. You have been through what I have been through, and solidarity with that. I don't care where you come from, what language you speak, or who you are, or whether you're male or female. If you have suffered abuse, we're in the gang. We're in the same club. Join us. We have hats. We don't have hats, by the way, just in case anybody contacts me for hat. Yeah. But, we need to be supporting each other, not comparing.
Yeah, and ultimately, everybody deserves to have an existence where they feel safe.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that goes for kids too, So many kids witness abuse, and, they don't deserve that.
No. I'm going to have to go for a really long walk to try and digest this, but it's been absolutely unbelievable. Thank you so much for your time.
Bless you. Thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you.